Everyone, I'm going to call the meeting to order and ask everyone to get comfortable. We're going to have an interesting meeting tonight. May we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Peterson?
Here.
Councilmember Termini?
Here.
Councilmember Bertrand?
Here.
Councilmember Botworth?
Here.
Mayor Harlan?
Here. Will everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a presentation, so we have a group of people I think are going to come up.
Will our Capitola employees please join us at the front? Come on out.
I got to figure a better way of doing this. I don't know if the camera can see you. I think we need to turn the camera around at some point. Anyway, good evening. Welcome, welcome, welcome to all of you. And thank you for being here, and thank you every day for everything that you do for everyone here in Capitola. We would not be Capitola without all of you. You really help make it the special place that it is, that we love, that the tourists love, that you have to deal with all the time, that the residents love. You know, the residents here love living in Capitola. Why? Because you can get to their house in 1 minute or 2 minutes or 30 seconds if they call you. That's one of the things they love. They love their clean streets, the clean beach, the lifeguards, and the police officers, and Oscar and Ben, and everybody in the office, everybody. So we're all so proud of you, as you know. So this is designating Public Service Recognition Week, whereas the week of May 7th through May 13th has been designated as Public Service Recognition Week to honor the employees of local, state, and federal government and members of the uniformed services, whereas without these public servants at every level, continuity would be impossible in a democracy that regularly changes its elected officials, sometimes. And these unsung heroes do the work that keeps our nation working, whereas the 69 employees at the City of Capitola provide invaluable service to both residents and visitors every day, whether by keeping our city safe and clean, providing information, helping guide its future development, and more. Whereas the ability of our governments to be responsive, innovative, effective depends on outstanding performance and dedicated public servants. Whereas public servants include safety inspectors, laborers, teachers, doctors, nurses, scientists, police officers, firefighters, engineers, accountants, administrators, and countless other occupations. Day in and day out, they provide the diverse services demanded by the American people and of their governments with efficiency and integrity. Now, therefore, I, Stephanie Harlan, Mayor of the City of Capitola, do hereby proclaim May 7th through 13th as Public Service Recognition Week and thank the people who work for us all, uniformed and ununiformed, men, women, young, old. As they say, together we're stronger. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Are there comments? No, there's strong silence. They're action-oriented group.
The next item is additional materials, and we have some on our table, supplemental material for the Capitola Library and others. Linda?
Yes, we have 3 items. For item 8B, we have additional background material on allocated costs. For item 8C, we have a revised staff report which includes the resolution that didn't print the first time and corrections. And for item 8D, we have an email public comment requesting a change to the vacation overlay.
Thanks. And there's copies of those in the back if anyone in the audience would like to see them. Next is additions and deletions to the agenda.
Staff has no changes.
Next item is public comments. This is the time for the public to come up and give us your thoughts on anything that's not on the agenda. If it's on the agenda, please wait till we get to it. But you're welcome to come up and sign in and give us your thoughts on anything else. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and council people. The reason I'm up here today is because there was an article in the last several days in the Sentinel about homeless in Santa Cruz. There's a big problem. For decades, Santa Cruz has been telegraphing across the nation for all homeless to come to Santa Cruz. In today's article, they mentioned that they're going to reach out to other jurisdictions to help with their problem. That's their problem, it's not ours. And I would encourage you all to send a message to Santa Cruz. We didn't create this problem. It's something you crawled in bed with 30, 40 years ago and have been ever since. I think Capitola has had a long-standing policy not to embrace homeless. And we only have a 2 by 2 square mile little city. Let's don't put more load on our police officers who are doing such a great job in getting our city written up in European newspapers and whatnot. That's all.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? I forgot to mention that this meeting is in Cablecast Live on Charter Communications, Cable Television Channel 8, for those of you who subscribe, and AT&T UVerse Channel 99. It's being recorded to be rebroadcast on Wednesday at 8 a.m., Saturday following the first rebroadcast at 1 p.m. on Charter Channel 71 and Comcast Channel 25. And meetings can also be viewed from the city's website, www.cityofcapitola.org. Tonight, our technician is Lynn Dunton. And as a reminder, please turn off your cell phones during the meeting, and please sign in if you'd like to have your name spelled correctly in the minutes. Oral communications now from council members. Ed, do you have any?
I do not.
John?
Yeah. I made the right decision. My daughter just came home from school, and she invited me to dinner. I've been trying to schedule her all week to do something with Dad. Didn't work out that way, but because of that, I missed the FACT meeting. So, I'm sorry, I'm a parent. When my daughter invites me to dinner, I do it. I'm awfully sorry.
Mike, do you have anything?
I have a few. Next Friday, we'll be having the community awards from the Chamber of Commerce. Will be held at the Seascape Golf Club. You can contact the Chamber for tickets. I would like to call to the attention of the rest of the council a very significant move by our representative on the RTC, Jacques Bertrand. Thank you, Jacques. You and Supervisor Bruce McPherson came forward and asked, as an addition to the study being done on the rail trail, that a trail-only option be considered as well. Thank you for making it a complete study and not trail only. Thank you. Sure, I'll pass the ball back to you. You can throw it back to me again. No, good.
No, I did make that comment, and I did receive a number of letters in support of that. The RTC right now is doing a unified study on the various transit options in this area. And certainly because of the efforts that we've done in trying to figure out what the issues are important for Capitola, one of the things that came out of Vision Capitola was that a lot of the people in this area would like to have a trail and not a rail. So as our representative, it's important for us to get those concerns on the RTC as part of that discussion. It doesn't mean that it's going to go one way or the other, but what it does mean in terms of our request is that it's considered. So the voice of Capitola, it was, you could say it wasn't statistical or whatever, but it did rise out up to the top of one of the concerns that Vision Capitola identified as important to the citizens of this community.
Thank you for that, Jacques. While we still have a couple of the members of our police department here with regard to the proclamation, in this time in our country where it's apparent that there are police issues everywhere, we have the most exemplary police department I've ever experienced. How many council members get people sitting down writing letters to us about how much they enjoyed the police enforcement they either witnessed or were the focus of, and that they appreciated the respect and the professionalism that our force displays. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Were we not going to have something regarding the enforcement of the sign ordinance? And does the council really need to tell you again that we want to enforce the sign ordinance? Or are we still good to go on that?
So I'll take a stab at answering this, and our community development director can correct me if I'm wrong, but recently council passed a policy, adopted a new policy about a proactive code enforcement program in the village. I know staff has taken the first steps to notify folks of the new enforcement program and give them a period of time to deal with their signs. And then I guess, Rich, maybe you can step in and talk about how we're going to be rolling out the proactive program.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council. The city manager is correct, so we did get that direction from you. I want to say 2 meetings ago, we've since done an inventory of the village. We've identified all the unpermitted sandwich board signs and outdoor displays. We subsequently talked to each business owner personally or their manager, told them what the violation was. The following day, we sent out letters to every village business owner notifying them, every village property owner, excuse me, notifying them of the policy change and gave them 30 days to abate all unpermitted violations. And on day 31, we will enforce either by removing unpermitted signs or issuing daily fines.
Thank you. And lastly, with regard to the public comment, we may be 2 square miles, but we are not an island. Homelessness is everyone's responsibility. It does not stop at our city limits. So thank you.
I will say that this Saturday, May 13th, will be the Human Race down on Delaware Street. It's a fundraising activity. It's a walk, run, 5 miles that starts at 2300 Delaware, and it goes all the way along West Cliff down to Lighthouse Park and back. It's an opportunity to raise money for several different nonprofit organizations. I will be walking with the Community Action Board team, and so if anyone is interested in getting out into the sunshine on Saturday and walking a good 5 miles, then you are welcome to join.
Great, great, wonderful, wonderful activity. I was absent at the last meeting, I'm sorry, because I attended an annual conference of the California Water Environment Association down in Palm Springs, and for the sanitation district. And I'm the chair of the sanitation district, and we have about a $50 million budget. And and I need to learn more about all of these things, so I try to go to the conferences when I can. So this was an excellent conference to learn about all sorts of things about the sanitary sewer system, and with odor control information for Jacques and the rest of us. And attended a lot of really interesting workshops, and attended one on root control. And you might say that doesn't sound very interesting, but it's very, very important, because as a homeowner, if you have roots that get into your lateral, you have a big bill. I don't know how much that would cost. How much would that cost, Ed?
$350.
For the plumber to come out and repair them?
Root it out.
Yeah. And, well, to rotor-rooter it, and then...
Just to run the snake through it, that's the minimum.
Right. And then if it's more than that, the price goes way up. So it's something we all should be aware of. And actually, you know, as homeowners planting trees, you kind of not plant them right on top of your sewer line. I mean, I have a birch tree on top of mine that I'm worried about. But anyway, we could certainly give some information to our residents about this in maybe our next newsletter. And I asked them, what are the worst trees? And they said ficus in downtown areas just ruin the pipes, and eucalyptus, because they have such a tough root. So maybe on our tree list, we should eliminate ficus and eliminate eucalyptus, or tell the water department to do the same thing. But anyway, they have a lot of mechanical things to remove roots, a lot of chemical things that can be used. But it's really more important than you think. So maybe we can get some information out about that to our citizens at some point in a newsletter. So moving on, are there any other comments from council members? From City Treasurer, please.
Yes, we did hold a Financial Advisory Committee meeting today, Jacques. We got the budget, proposed budget for fiscal year 2017-18. We got a chance to partially go through it, but did not finish it. So you got Jacques got plenty of opportunity to take a look at it. We're going to meet again next week, May 17th, to go through it, and hopefully at the end of that, the FAC will make a recommendation to the City Council. In addition to that, we, as you may know, are losing our Finance Director. Tomorrow was his last day, and we went through a very rigorous interview process. I was fortunate to be part of that, part of 2 panels where we interviewed several candidates, and in a very formal and structured manner with questions that were pre-written, and it was very, I found it very interesting. I've hired a lot of people, but never in such a public manner. Anyway, so we went through that process. We have some candidates that we reviewed. We've made some recommendations, and Jamie has taken the ball from there, and hopefully he will find someone to replace Mark, although that will be difficult.
Thank you. Any other staff comments?
I did have just a couple comments. First, I just wanted to note that the draft budget has been distributed. It will go up on the web as soon as we can, but there's copies there that you have in front of you. If you don't need your copy, Councilmember Termini, we're happy to take it. We will put it to good use if you're happy working off an electronic version. I also wanted to note that this last week we had the first meeting of the inaugural Monterey Bay Community Power, which is going to be a new way of providing power in the Monterey Bay region. Councilmember Bertrand and I attended on behalf of Capitola. The target is to roll out delivering power to customers spring of 2018. So we have a very ambitious schedule ahead of us and a lot of key deadlines if we're going to meet and make that. And then lastly, I did want to acknowledge Mark. I know he's going to be making a presentation later tonight, but just wanted to take a minute to thank him for all of his service to the city. It hasn't been long enough, in my opinion. I wish it could have been longer, but at the same time, he's made a real difference in the finance department. He's really been able to bring a fresh sense and new ideas to the entire city, and I want to thank him for the service he's provided. So, thank you.
Thank you. I also forgot to mention that Jacques and I went to the League of California Cities Monterey Bay Division dinner on Monday night in Watsonville, and the guest speaker was a league staff person who talked about CalPERS, and we got an earful about what's going on in the state. And then the other speaker was a CalPERS staff member who came down and tried to explain things in such a way that we understood it. It was a little advanced for, I think, for most people, unless you're a finance director. But it was good. You want to say anything about it?
I do think that this is something to be very concerned about, and I should note that Jamie was there. He was actually the MC. So I was impressed. You're certainly on top of the issues, and so that's good stead for Capitola. Also, in regards to that, I've brought up at the RTC that we should have a review of our PERS situation also. Even though there's a lot of electeds in that room, they have PERS issues dealing with their own particular constituencies, but this agency probably needs the same amount of attention that we would at any city or county board of supervisors.
Good, thank you. Other staff comments?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just want to give a heads up to the Council that we are looking at a situation on the wharf where we have been unable to get the floating docks in. Usually we get them in by May 1st. When we went to install them this year, we determined that one of the steel piles had broken off under the water, unbeknownst to us until we started planning and checking everything out. So we're scrambling right now, looking for additional steel posts. They are actually driven into the seabed, so we're also seeing if there's a contractor with a driver available to do it. I'm having an engineer looked at it. He's developing a report, see if we could put it in without the steel pile that's missing, so we'll have that report next week. So we're working as fast as we can. Until then, the boat and bait shop is not renting out spaces in the mooring. So it's unfortunate that we didn't know about it earlier, and we're trying to get it open as quickly as we can.
Do we rent spaces on Hooper's Beach anymore to boats? We
don't, because we had 3 years in a row and that boats were damaged up there during high surf, so there just wasn't enough sand. And I think the last couple winters it has also gone up there, although we haven't had boats there. So even though we are not liable for the damage to the boats, we just felt it was inappropriate for us to rent out spaces where we kind of knew that they would get damaged there. So we have stopped that practice.
Yes.
Steve, with regard to your comments, when are we going to get our proposed plan for the rebuilding of the wharf?
So we're in the process now of, with the new budget, we will have the financing in place to start that study. So we're actually not under contract to with the engineer yet for that study.
It's more than a study, though. This is a
right.
Okay.
Right. It's the design and everything.
We've studied it. We know what's wrong. That's okay.
Anyway,
It's okay.
So we'll be starting that very quickly with starting in the next year.
And
actually working on the proposals with them right now.
If at the pleasure of the council, at that same time, when that staff report is prepared, perhaps the city manager could bring us a report at the same time as to how we can bond around future Measure F funds so that we can accelerate the process of rebuilding. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other staff comments? Then we'll go on to the consent calendar. This is a list of relatively minor items that we take with one motion, and a council member can pull an item, or a member of the audience can pull it for separate discussion or separate vote. So would any council member like to pull any? Jacques?
I don't know if I need to pull it, but I want clarification on the minutes. So this is 781.
Sure. You want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Jacques?
So I wanted to have a question of clarification on the minutes from last meeting. So on page 4, talking about accessory dwelling units. So I remember that discussion, and we passed on a lot of the recommendations from City Council, Planning Commission, but I don't remember removing the deed restriction for affordable housing incentives. I do remember making comments that if there's going to be public support for affordable housing on any level, that deed restrictions would be something we would want, because providing public monies for private use and not having the benefit of that use for affordable housing. So I was just wanting some clarification on that.
Yes, that was a direction from Planning Commission at the
Correct.
April meeting, and I believe I just had one slide on it when I went through the different changes to accessory dwelling units, and I don't recall any discussion, any direction to go in a different direction.
Okay.
We can put that on another
We
agenda?
bring that back?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to bring that back. So it escaped me. I'm awfully sorry for that. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor, board members, I think probably the thing to do is to discuss it when we're talking about the zoning code here later tonight. Yeah. Oh, good.
Great.
Okay.
Any other questions about that?
No.
Would any other council member like to pull any other item from the consent, or any member of the public like to pull an item for separate discussion?
I'll move consent.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and I'm abstaining from A because I was absent. Motion carries. Next item are the general government public hearings, and we have 4 tonight, and we'll start out with A, Animal Services Agreement with Chief McManus. Good evening.
Madam Mayor, council members, good evening to you. As you mentioned, we're here tonight to make a presentation and discuss our animal services unit, both our animal services unit within the Capitola Police Department, the City of Capitola, and the current status of our contract with the Santa Cruz Animal Services Authority. You have the staff report in front of you. I have a very short presentation here, about 8 slides. A lot of it is historical information and probably some reminders for you. And of course, we'll be available for questions at the end of the presentation. The Santa Cruz County Animal Services Authority, ASA, was established in June of 2002 to provide consolidated animal shelter and animal control services throughout the county. At that time, we were a member, Capitola was a member, and it included all jurisdictions in the county, so the 4 cities and the county of San Diego, all part of the ASA in June of 2002. Under the plan back then, Capitola PD maintained our animal services unit for animal control and enforcement, which we have a strong desire to continue that, and it works out very well. And the city was charged an annual fee based upon the population size only. The first year, the annual fee for the city was $28,500. By 2007, as you can see on the slide, ASA costs increased substantially to a projected $74,000 in the year at 2007, at which point the city and staff recommended a move to local SPCA due to the costs associated with the increase. So from 2007 to 13, the city contracted with Santa Cruz SPCA for boarding and adoption services at the cost of about $30,000 a year. We maintained our animal services unit with the police department. As we've done in the city for 40 years, in the last 20 years, our CSO program on the police department actually, and police officers actually handle all of the animal calls within the city of Capitola. In July of 2013, SPCA notified the city that they would no longer provide services, animal boarding services and adoption services for the city of Capitola. So at that point, staff brought forward a proposal to enter into a contract for boarding and adoption services only with the Santa Cruz ASA at a cost of $23,500. This past summer in 2016, the city was notified by ASA that they would no longer provide contract services for Capitola PD. They, in fact, wanted Capitola to join the ASA as a member on the JPA. We were at that point, and currently the only city in the county that was not a member of the JPA. Since the city received notice, staff worked with ASA to revise the cost-sharing formula. Up to that point, the formula was simply based upon the population of the city, 100% based upon the population of the city. And Capitola, as you know, has a lower rate of service needs than other communities. And so staff worked and negotiated to an extent with the ASA board to hopefully come up with a different cost-sharing formula, and we were in fact successful there. The formula as proposed today from ASA is 25% calls for service, 25% impounds, and 50% population with the 4-year phase-in. It's in your staff report, and you can't see it on the slide here, so I'm going to try and zoom in for you. But this is the new agreed upon, ASA agreed upon cost-sharing formula. And hopefully you can, here we go. And so with the new formula, if you look in the, can you see that okay? I hope that you can. I don't know that I can zoom it anymore. Capitola has the 3-year average for the number of impounds for the city of Capitola is 1.9%. The 3-year average for the percentage of calls for service is 0.2%, and the city's percentage of the countywide population is 3.8%. And so the new contribution formula is 2.4%. The total membership contribution for Capitola would be, you can see it right, if I can get my mouse to work right here, 61,053.
And how many animals were picked up?
We average about 100 animals per year, and that is a consistent average going back many years. I did look at that, 100 animals per year. So the 4-year phase-in, if I go to the bottom here, as I mentioned, we're currently paying $23,500 under the current contract with ASA. Our first year, so July 1st of 2017, if council directs that we go forward with this recommendation, is a total cost of $32,753, or an increase over the current cost of about $9,500. And then year 2 would be an additional $9,500 increase to a cost of $42,187. And if you go from left to right there, you can see year 3 is $51,620. And then year 4, we meet that number of $61,053 for the total contribution based upon that cost distribution.
And are they mostly dogs? Do you know? Did you look at the breakdown of it?
It's mostly dogs, a good number of cats, some other animals that are a low number of the total average of about 100 a year. But I think I'm correct in assuming that it's mostly dogs and cats. Marquise, is that correct? That's correct. Mostly dogs and cats. To give you an idea of the workload for our animal services program here with the police department, and these are 2016 numbers. We averaged about 15 total calls per month As I mentioned, the CSOs, Chad and Eric, they respond to all of those calls during their working hours, which is 7 days a week from 7 in the morning until 5 p.m. And then after their hours, our officers respond to those calls from 5 p.m. until 7 in the morning. About 15% of the CSO's total daily workload is related to response to animal services calls in the city. If we go forward with the recommendation to rejoin or become a member of the ASA, we are are in the process of creating a hybrid protocol, and we're working with ASA staff as well as NetCom up on the Hill, our dispatch center, to create this new protocol. What we want to achieve for sure is to maintain our Capitola PD Animal Services Unit. The officers are passionate about that response. We're passionate about the care that we provide to the animals, and the citizens are very passionate that we maintain, and we believe that we maintain that program. So it's going to need the creation of a hybrid type protocol. And so what we envision will be the Capitola Police Department, the Animal Services Unit, will continue to respond to the emergency calls, animal calls with public safety concerns, all calls on or near Capitola Beach, dead animal calls, and other calls as deemed necessary by a Capitola PD supervisor. That last piece there, that last bullet, if I could touch on it in a minute, in the early part of the program as we're working through this new hybrid protocol and working with dispatch as well as ASA, it's going to be incumbent for our supervisors to participate in those dispatch calls. I think at some point, probably soon, within 3 to 6 months, we'll settle in to a recognized protocol, and there may not be that necessity to have a supervisor monitoring every single call. But until we get to that point, we think that it's necessary that the sergeants monitor the dispatch calls. As far as animal control officers assigned to ASA, they will be responsible for joint response to those high priority calls that I just mentioned in the previous slide. An independent response to non-emergency calls not requiring an immediate response from Capitola PD. NASA would be responsible for the veterinary services, animal boarding, and adoption services as they're currently responsible for that. Staff did research other options before coming forward with this presentation, including the opportunity potentially to rejoin local SPCA, some out-of-county providers. Neither of those options seem feasible at this point, and so our recommendation is that the city rejoin ASA as a full member beginning July 1st of this year. And I'm certainly available for questions.
Thank you. Mike.
Chief, I started to look at this just in dollars and cents.
Yes.
But can you tell me, will this result in a more effective CSO team productivity and delivery of service by relieving them of this duty?
We do envision that they're going to spend less than 15% of their time on a daily basis available for other types of service, yes.
Right, so there are benefits to this. It's not just somebody jacked up the prices, we have to pay them.
Well, and that benefit is the joint response by ASA and ASA animal control officers responding to those non-priority calls that will be their responsibility 100% under this new plan.
Thank you.
Doc?
Just to follow up, what's a non-priority call?
I don't have a list, but the easiest example of a non-priority call would be something like a found dog that is neither a safety risk or injured, found by a citizen. The citizen can deliver the dog, and they often do, to the boarding facility themselves, or perhaps they don't have the means to that, and they're going to stand by for ASA's response to pick up that dog.
Okay, so they'll come here normally to pick up a dog?
That's correct.
Okay. Do we respond to barking dog noise and complaints from neighbors in that sense?
We do. We frequently get those calls.
Okay. And so we have the means to look at animal noise level and frequency? Okay.
That's correct.
Do our police officers that are involved in this get training to deal adequately with the animals?
They have. We've done performed joint training with ASA and SPCA many years ago. And because they've been involved for 20 years, they've acquired a high level of training themselves as it relates to response to these calls and care for the animals.
So one officer will bring on a new person and sort of train as they go?
I'm sorry, say again?
One officer will bring on a new person and train as they go, or do we get the annuals? Or I'm just trying to get an idea, because like dog could bite someone. I mean, there could be some interesting issues there.
Sure. The experts are our two CSOs,
Okay.
Chad and Eric. As new officers are hired on, this is part of their training and orientation program, introducing a level of familiarity with animal service calls.
Okay, that was my concern. Thanks.
Other questions? This is a public hearing. Would anyone in the public like to address us on this or have any questions about this? Then I'll close the public hearing and bring it back.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Second?
Do I understand that they're going to be picking up all the animals?
No. There's a percentage of calls for service. You're referring to ASA, is my
Yeah.
assumption. There's a percentage of calls for service that are low priority that they would be responding to and picking up the animals. Other calls will likely remain as is the case in our current program where we transport animals. Or if we're responding together to the same incident, animal control officers and PD, they would be the entity that recovers the dog and transports.
I just am wondering whether there's going to be any confusion about who's going to pick up the animal or who's going to take care of the situation, and how long it'll take them. If it's a low priority, are they going to get there in an hour or 2 or 4 hours, or do they have any time frames that they're going to try to work within? Because I can hear my phone ringing now. Where are they? Where are they? I've called.
Right. Our early discussions with ASA, some of the discussions have been related to both calls for service and response times. And so I think that they will work with us and are committed to improving upon their response times. But one of the reasons we want to maintain our animal services unit is to make sure that we're able to provide that high level of service ourselves.
Yeah, that's great. One more question. Jamie, you want to answer that too?
One point I just wanted to add is that so this is the conceptual direction at this point, and if your council were to approve the staff recommendation, what we would do is work with ASA staff to actually draft the JPA amendment, and it would be a trailing item that would come back on consent on one of your future items to actually take the action to join ASA.
My other question is, what kind of costs are we looking at in the future in the JPA? We know what it is now. We know what it is next year. We're tied into it for how long? Can we get an escape clause in case they decide to double our fee in 3 years or 4 years or 5 years?
I'll try and answer. It's a 4-year phase-in, not to be confused with a 4-year contract. Is that accurate, Jamie?
Yes. So the JPA itself also includes termination language. So in any given year, we can opt out of the JPA. There's a 4-year phase-in. Obviously, it's more expensive than we've been paying in the past. As with multi-jurisdictional negotiations, there's different perspectives on this type of issue. And if you saw in the charts, Watsonville has a very high per capita usage rate. And so any formula that favors calls for service ends up impacting Watsonville negatively. So there was a lot of give and take about the formula and where it was going to land. So I think your concern is well-founded. I think we need to continue to look for other options. We have a 4-year phase-in, and if down the road there becomes an option that makes more sense for the city, we're not precluded from pursuing it.
Do we have a seat on their board?
We do.
Just thought of one more question. So we lost our dog and went through the whole thing of getting it from the SPCA at that time. So if an officer in this town picks up a dog and they see the name of the dog's owner on the tag, what do we do? Do we turn it in to ASA, or do we try to contact the resident here? What do we do?
They make every effort to reunite that dog with the proper owner, as long as the dog is not either a safety risk, behavioral type of issues, or injured.
Yeah, right, okay. And do we charge our residents for that service directly?
Yeah, there are, I believe as part of the fee schedule, there is an associated fee.
Okay.
Any other questions before we vote? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That topic will be back, I'm sure. Item B, design costs for the Capitola Branch Library. And we have some supplemental information here also.
Information that was provided in the January meeting, and then some additional information regarding a breakdown of the cost. Good evening, Mayor and Council. We're here to talk about the library design cost, ask for a contract increase. Nolan Tam was appointed the project architect back in November of 2016. At that time, all beliefs were that we were operating on a $10.6 million budget and a 13,000 square foot library. Once we got the project architect and our construction manager, project manager in place, they immediately, went through and started putting together the project budgets more formally that had been done in the past, and quickly realized that the project budget was significantly over what we had estimated or what the funding that was available. So we came to the council in January of 2017, and at that time, the council agreed to raise the project budget from $10.6 million to $13 million. Looking at the original budget and the amended budget, so the original budget's here in light brown. We had $10.6 million. That included an architectural and engineering fees of a little over $1 million. We awarded a contract to Nolan Tan that didn't include all of their subconsultants and specialty supplemental services. We knew that at the time, but we were confident that the $800,000 was the architect's fees and most of their consultants at that time, and we knew at that time we'd be coming back to add some of the supplemental fees, but we were trying to get this project moving and did our due diligence when we awarded the $800,000 contract. When we amended the budget, we weren't just amending the construction amount. We were amending, we added $200,000 to contingencies. You can see construction went from $7.5 million to $9.6 million. Contingencies went up $200,000. And the associated architectural and engineering fees also rose by $220,000. The rest of the fees, permits stayed the same. Project management just went up slightly. I think that was inconsistent with their contract at the time. And the other fees essentially stayed the same. You can see we have the $13 million budget there. So what we're here today is to look at raising Nolan Tan's fees to probably what it should have been. We would have never gotten our original project for the $800,000, given the cost of the project, the two costs of the project at that time. You can see the amended budget included the $1.295 million. We are also, didn't anticipate, but Nolan Tan has proven quite adept at doing the furniture, fixtures, and equipment design. They have an excellent interior design architect on their team. So we've included that into their fee at this point. So if you look at their contract as we're posing it today, this is the design and engineering fees. That includes all the supplemental fees, the sub-consultants, everything that it's an all-in package at this point. We have $65,000 in FF&E, bringing it to a total of $1,333,864. So I know this is a large increase, but it's almost $30,000 under what we had budgeted. We didn't clarify, if I go back a slide, we didn't break down in January when we talked about the revised budget, and I'll admit that and own up to it. We talked about the bottom line numbers here. We didn't really, although this information was there, we didn't dwell on these other fees going up at that time. So it may be catching you as a surprise, and I apologize for that. But it was certainly anticipated as we move forward with the project to amend the architect's fees and bring them in line with the size of the project that we're having today. So our recommendation tonight is to approve an adjustment to Nolan Tan's design contract for architectural services in the amount of $533,000 for a total contract in the $1,333,864. So that is my presentation. Dave Tanza, who is our project manager, is here, and he's actually done all the negotiating with Nolan Tan regarding their fees. He's here to answer questions. I will speak for him that Nolan Tan probably has spent more on their first phase, which was the schematic design. They've billed us for their schematic design, and they've probably spent more on their schematic design than they've billed us for. They're not looking to back charge us. They've been really good at doing what they say they're going to do and billing us just a percentage of what, they've completed and not billing us for every little fee that they can find. So I think they've done an excellent job. I mean, you can see the pictures I've included here. We're getting a beautiful library. We had our first design development design meeting last night or yesterday, and the details are turning out really nice. So I think we have a good architect, they have a good team, and I hope we can continue to move forward. So with that, Dave and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Steve, can I boil down everything you just said into a single sentence? The budget that the council approved several meetings ago has gone down by $30,000.
Yes, you could say that. That's a good way to put it, yes.
Say that.
Well, so that actual council members can understand it.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that's the best way to do
We
it.
are $30,000 under the $13 million budget that was approved in
Thank you.
January.
And that was just a matter of, we always anticipated consultants, but now we've rolled them all into Nolan Tam's contract.
Correct.
Thank you.
Jack?
So, I had a conversation with you, Mike. So I look to you because you're the most involved on the council that I know about, anyway, in the library. You're involved on the other end of that. But my sense is that as we refine the projections and costs, we're going to be less liable for cost overruns because we're doing the upfront work. So we're going to be better positioned to stay in budget. Is that your understanding? Okay. So I really appreciate your work. And who's the individual that's our? If you had I'd love to hear some comments. And it sounds like you were very involved in those negotiations. So I very much appreciate that.
Good evening. Welcome.
Madam Mayor, City Council. Yes, so we've been working really hard. I've been really working hard with Nolan Tam to develop their fees, and I think it's important, as Mike mentioned, that we've been able to. One of the things we did when we hired Nolan Tam, as you recall, we set the architect's fee at a no higher than number, so that all the teams that submitted knew what that number was, and we've been able to negotiate that number, and with additional fees, we're actually 1% less on the overall fee for them. So we've been able to keep them a pretty good space, and I think that if we're going to maintain the project as we're going along, we need to be good clients. And I think we've been a great client so far in that we're making really good decisions, we're making informed decisions, we've got a great committee, and that keeps everybody being efficient and helps us move forward. So I think we'll be able to control our costs as we move forward that way as well.
Thank you very much. Are there other questions right now? This is a public hearing. Would anyone in the audience like to speak about this issue? Then I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the council. If questions or comments?
I will move the staff recommendation.
Comment. I appreciate the work that's been done, and I do recognize that at this point it appears that this is $29,000 under budget, but I'm not willing to accept the comments that are any kind of guarantee that this project is going to continue to come in under budget. I think we're going to have to be very diligent, and I'm probably not going to support this measure because I still believe that the City of Capitol is not in a position to go this much in debt on this item. And I'm going to be hopeful that all the things that have been said here come to fruition and that this project does come in on time and on budget. But excuse me if I'm an optimist because I haven't seen that with projects in the past.
Other comments?
Excuse me, pessimist.
Oh,
No, we understood what you meant.
The intent was there.
yeah. I voted against this last time because I have some real concerns about how we're going to do this project and do all the other things that we want to do. But we'll have to put some things on the back burner. But I'm concerned about it also. But I'll support the motion. We have a motion and a second.
A little more.
Yes, John.
One more comment. It just occurs to me, to the consultant rather, you made a statement that to be good clients is important for this project to go forward, and I was just wondering if you explain that a little bit more. You did explain a little bit, but I didn't quite get everything that you were trying to allude to.
Sorry about that.
No, it's my understanding.
So one of the things that increases design fees and really impacts costs is when clients aren't decisive and don't come with clear goals. For example, the library committees has very clear goals on what they want. Susan Nimitz knows how she wants the library to work. Her staff have a clear indication of how they want. The community members on the committee have really good ideas about how important this library is to the community, how it's going to be. And I think that clear direction keeps everything focused, and hopefully will keep us on budget as well as we move forward. If we had sort of everybody off in different ways, the architects are designing one way and designing another way and trying to please everybody, things just take forever, and things aren't consistent, and that does increase cost. So I think that's what I was saying. If we're good clients, which we are, by keeping everybody focused on what they, on what's the best library for Capitola, that's how we're going to get the project done on time and on schedule.
I appreciate that answer, and I think that focus is very clear with our citizens committees, our fundraising committee here, and not just the design committee. So I think Capitola in general has a very clear focus about what we want for the city in terms of our library. It's going to be certainly the first thing in a long time, and it's going to be a very important part of this community. So thanks for your help.
Any other comments? May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Peterson?
Aye.
Councilmember Termini?
Aye.
Councilmember Bertrand?
Aye.
Councilmember Bottorff?
No.
Mayor Harlan?
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Item C, fee schedule for the next fiscal year, 2017. How much we're going to charge everybody for services. Very exciting topic.
For his swan song, our finance director.
Good evening.
Mayor, members of council, this is the first action in the fiscal year 2017-18 budget, and that's just adopting our annual fee schedule for the year. There's really two main changes. One's an inflationary adjustment of 3.1% that's applied across the board. As you know, the main foundation of our fee schedule is personnel costs to provide these services to the community. Our COLA for next year is projected at 3.1%, therefore our inflationary adjustment for the fees is also 3.1%. There's also two additional fees included in the fee schedule. These were adopted during the year under other resolutions. The first is the Blue Curb program in Public Works, as well as the last meeting, the confiscated property as it relates to the village code enforcement procedure. And just one thing before I turn it over for questions. As you guys know, this is my last meeting with the City of Capitola. I want to thank the Mayor and City Council for all your support. I've only been here about 2 years. It's been a great time. Capitola is a great community. Also like to thank the City Manager. You really took a risk on me, kind of set my career in a path that I wanted to go. Look forward to my future, also continuing the relationship with the City Manager. And also to all the department directors. You guys really have a great team in place. These are dedicated staff members. They provided me a lot of support over the last 2 years, and just really want to thank them as well as the city manager yourself for 2 incredible years.
They must have thrown you a great party yesterday, didn't they?
So with that, I'd answer any questions as it relates to the fee schedule.
3.1 for CPI. Other public agencies we're involved with are using less than that. Is the Bay Area and so forth. I think Sanitation District is just raising its rates, and CPI, they're using it too, I think.
So under our current MOUs with all the bargaining groups, it's an average of the CPI for the whole year of last year, which is 3.1%. And since our employees are getting a 3.1% COLA, our fees are really based on personnel. Since we're a service organization, it's our people that provide the services to process permits and so forth. So with a COLA of 3.1%, our inflationary adjustment follows that on the fee schedule.
Other questions?
I have a question about the confiscated property fee. It's kind of a two-part question, I suppose. So the first part of the question is the confiscation of property. I'm assuming that's only from our police or our CSOs, staff, not any kind of citizens arrest kind of thing or anything like that, correct?
Correct.
And then, so that would be the only reason anyone would have to pay that fee, correct? Okay,
Correct.
cool. Thank you.
Good. Well, I wanted to discuss a couple of them with council members. I wanted to, might have a seat for just a minute. I wanted to consider changing the administration decision appeal fee and the regular appeal fee from $500 to page 56, 8C1. Just the
Does it say 8?
Exhibit A.
Exhibit A, 8C, what? 8C?
1,
Okay, 58.
56,
Got it.
58, yeah. I think the $500 is way too high, and I understand the, administrative decision appeal fee would involve staff time and so forth, but we've had a couple of citizens this year, and we don't have very many, but that want to appeal something. $500 is a lot of money for people to do that. We had one that was the neighbor at 224 San Jose, I think, that emailed us and called and so forth and was thinking about appealing, and then he lives out of town, and then we heard it was $500. It's kind of, thought it was a lot of money. So anyway, I think we should turn that back to around $300. And I know it costs us time and money, but just to make the it's kind of pour salt on a wound when the citizens have to pay a lot of money to do what they feel is their right anyway.
Madam Mayor, if I could ask a question of staff. Mr. City Manager, we cleared up the issue about council members sending in an administrative appeal without cost, and they're still able to sit on the decision-making panel for that. Is that correct? There was some language that went on
They settled.
last year. I believe they settled it out, so we can still appeal and yet still sit on the panel?
My understanding is that that court decision was subsequently overturned, or there was another court case that cleared that up a little bit. So presuming a council member appeals a project in a relatively non-biased way, that the project is just being elevated and not specifically enumerating all the faults or the joys of the project, and doesn't sort of prejudice their case, that they could still hear the case, yes.
Then, on that basis, Madam Mayor, I think that any citizen can petition any council member
They don't know that.
to
Some of them
appeal
don't know
it.
that.
I think that's the message that needs to come out, because that makes it a free appeal, which is even better than $300.
I know, but people don't know that, and they're kind of, a little intimidated sometimes to contact council members. And I just think that it's a kind of a right, like voting, that a citizen could appeal something, and it shouldn't cost them an arm and a leg.
Well, it shouldn't cost them anything. That's why I think they should approach us. But with regard to them being shy about contacting us, my inbox would speak against that particular assessment.
Well, that's just my, over the years, that's just been my point of view, that people are, they're a little bit hesitant to do that. And it would be nice to make it so that it's affordable.
I'd have no problem with
The other
300.
thing I want to talk about is a tree removal.
Do you want to talk on that one item by itself, or you want to go into
Sure.
all of them? I'd like to weigh in on that
Sure.
individual one.
Sure, let me tell you what they all are, and then you can see what you want to do.
I thought I would want to know if
okay.
you want to do them each individually or do them all
No, I'll
at
tell you
once.
what all my concerns are, and then you can
Oh,
know
okay. All
what
right.
they're.
Go ahead with all
Anyway,
of
the tree removal, staff review is $127, but if they have to take it to the planning commission, there again, it's $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot. That's a lot for a citizen that just wants to cut down their tree and has some disagreement with staff, I guess. I'd like them to have their day in court without having it to cost them a lot of money. And then I didn't remember the residential blue curb program. We adopted that?
Yeah, it's new.
Just on certain streets, though, wasn't it?
No,
Was it on?
we could do it. It could happen anywhere.
They can apply anywhere.
Okay. And, let me see.
What page was it?
The tree is on 63, page 63 in the packet. It's on, it's on the second paragraph from the top, where it says tree removal, staff reviews. So those were my two, and then just the cost of living question. So Ed, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll start with the appeal process, and then maybe I might ask Rich to weigh in on the tree removal, because I'm not sure on that. But, there was a reason for the appeal process. I mean, this came out of what I thought was frivolous appeals by residents, and maybe, situations that like I said, they weren't necessary because it was so easily available. It does take staff time, and I know that, Rich, you can weigh in on this, when we have to do an appeal. And I know that if someone goes to the city and they want to even add a sign to their building, they can be paying, a processing fee of $650, $700 just to have a sign evaluated. And when somebody complains about a project, This does, I mean, I am against making it so it seems like it's not that much or doesn't have an impact. And I think we had a lot of discussion on coming up with the $500 to make sure that it was a fair amount. I mean, I know it probably costs, and Rich, if you want to add in, it's in excess of $500 in staff time. It costs us. This is just a novelty amount that we're collecting. And maybe novelty isn't the right word, but it's somewhat fair. Can you give me an estimate about how much time staff would actually do an appeal?
Sure, and I'd also point out as context, I want to guesstimate it was 4 to 6 months ago we had this discussion, increased it from $142, which is what it had been for years, and the council directed us to change it to $500 at that time. But Councilman Bottorff's comment is right on the money. Typically, to bring something from the Planning Commission to the City Council, you're probably talking in the range of a couple $1,000s, and then quickly go up if you have a real persistent appellant who brings a lot of issues and that requires responses. Those can get relatively expensive. I would also point out that oftentimes a complaint I've heard throughout my career from applicants is, why should this person be ringing up my bill? I'm paying the city's bill to process a lot of this, and if you make it too easy for them, it's costing me money. So I really think the key is striking a balance of making a fee that is not too easy for somebody to come in on a frivolous case to file an appeal, but not so much that you're deterring their due process rights to appeal.
In addition to that, when these appeals are brought, it can, like you brought up, it can bring additional cost to the property owner, and it's not fair to have people, like in my sense, making frivolous appeals. And if there is something that we feel, and I hope that we choose not to abuse that policy up here, if somebody comes to us and it seems to be a legitimate concern, then I would encourage anybody on this council to represent that citizen. But sometimes we, in our mind, I know we had an issue on Oak Drive that never came to the council that I'm not sure where that would have fared, but that was part of the motivation for us saying, look, this has to be a reasonable fee that makes somebody say, okay, I'm so strong about this and committed about this that I'm going to pay this money, because if it was $142, it was happening too much. And I think it was something that I witnessed taken advantage of. And I'm thinking, there has to be some sense of us that protects the homeowner. I mean, just because someone decides to do something on their property, they become the victim of 20 people around them. And like I said, a lot of frivolous things were brought up. I think this city, I think this planning department, I think the building department work very diligently to protect homes when they do permits and follow up on this. So I'm not, willing at all to my position was one vote. I'd not support lowering this lower than $500. And with regard to the tree removal, is this a tree removal permit or is it a tree removal appeal permit? I'm not.
So I have to confess, I talked to Katie after I heard that comment, trying to think about what type of tree permit would go to the Planning Commission. Neither of us can think of an instance off the top of our heads. We haven't had one since either of us have been here. There are situations where you need a coastal development permit to remove a tree. Those have to go to a Planning Commission, but those are charged a coastal permit fee. So I'd really need to look at that, and it may be a fee that we don't even need to have on the books.
I can recall when it happened recently, and that is on Riverview, which was a few years ago before you came. There was someone who wanted to remove a tree from the front yard. The arborist went out, or our staff person went out, and $127 is a deal, by the way, for a staff person to go out there. They evaluated the tree. It was in perfect health. It was not overgrown. It was not causing any damage, and they recommended they do not remove the tree. It was being done purely for aesthetic reasons. They appealed it. They brought it to the Planning Commission. It went from the Planning Commission on to the City Council. It was ultimately denied, but it required an enormous amount of staff time. $1,000 was a deal.
I think in the case you just described, that would be an appeal fee.
Right, and that was my question. A tree permit should not be $1,000. A tree appeal process, I could see where that would be more cumbersome, and that's what you're describing. So
my point was if they see that it's going to cost $1,000, they'll just go cut it down on a weekend. If we make it fee so high for something like that, we're not going to get compliance necessarily. So.
Yeah, this is something that, if the council desires, I'd really like to go back so I can give you better information. As you recall, the tree ordinance is pretty long. It's got kind of some odd provisions. So there might be something in there that dictates that fee that we just haven't experienced.
I just received a tree removal permit, and I paid the fee, the $127. It was looked at by staff and determined the tree was a hazard and was getting ready to fall down. And that was it, that $127. I received a permit to remove the tree. I was done.
Right.
I can only assume this $1,000 is to bring it to the next level.
It's got to be an appeals. Can you, I would like to see it come back. I'd like you to do the research, come back. I'm sure if you give us the facts, we would be able to make a collective decision.
That's
I think we're on the same page on that one. Okay.
Thank you.
If I may weigh in on, there's a lot of talk about the staff time costs, but I would like to say that there are hard costs. As the person who does the noticing, there is the postage cost. In addition to that time, many of these have, of the appeals have variances or conditional use permits which require advertising, which we have to pay for. So it is not merely staff time costs, but there are hard costs, checks that the city is writing against the cost of these appeals.
Right, and I'm not disputing any of that. I'm just coming from the point of trying to make it a user-friendly experience to try to appeal something. And I know we had that, we've had that bad experience, but I'm just coming from the property owner who doesn't have a lot of money, something's going on, they want to appeal it to get it heard again for whatever reason, and this is just seems like a lot of money. And I know that we do have a lot of these costs, but we don't make money on everything we do. And so my point was just maybe to give these people a break in being able to appeal a project or appeal their tree. So, but I understand it all costs a lot of money. Jacques?
Rich, when you look at that, about the tree permit, when I was campaigning, one thing that came up a couple of times actually, once the tree was dead, and the guys complained he had to get a permit to take out a dead tree. So if you could clarify that for me, I tried to figure it out.
Tree's dead, you can take it down.
Okay, well,
But it has to actually be dead. We've heard people say something's dead in the winter because there's no leaves on it.
Mostly, yeah, that's. Yeah.
So,
I don't think he was talking about that because I checked the tree out. Okay, so good.
yeah.
I'd like to. Well, I'll come to your office. I want to sort of see that section. Thanks.
Perhaps I could attempt a motion to approve the fee schedule with the exception of the tree removal permit, which will come back for clarification.
Second.
Council, I just have one suggestion on the motion is could you continue the hearing on the tree removal permit to a date specific, maybe the next meeting, because there is some noticing, as our clerk indicated, that's required.
So moved. So moved.
And that second is okay with that.
May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Peterson?
Aye.
Councilmember Termini?
Aye.
Councilmember Bertrand?
Aye.
Councilmember Bottorff?
Aye.
Mayor Harlan?
No. Thank you very much. The next item is item D, zoning code update.
This is for this particular item, plus the affordable stuff, right? The affordable, yeah, third floor, but this is the third floor specifically.
And one other one.
Two affordable ADUs.
And something else.
Really? I thought it was two. Three?
Did you guys talk about the map last time at all? Is that the map?
Right.
Oh, yeah, this was
That was it. Okay. Yes, the environmental report.
I couldn't.
So it was three.
Rich, I have a question before we start. Or maybe it's for Katie. In looking at the maps today, the vacation rental use and the village residential overlay and all of those, the Quality Inn is in, the property for the Quality Inn is in the AHO, the Affordable Housing Overlay. Why did we put that in there? Were we thinking that might convert to affordable housing someday?
So during
Or that property next door?
So during the housing element update 2 cycles ago, so not the most recent one we did in 2015, but probably 2009, 8, somewhere around there, the state had higher regional housing needs assessment, the RHNA numbers for the city. And it's my understanding at that time that instead of rezoning property, we identified 2 affordable housing opportunity sites. Quality Inn was one, 600 Park Avenue is the other. And what that effectively does is it allows somebody, if they want to develop affordable housing, they could get extra density and relaxed development standards for building on those properties.
Aren't there some more sites around town we could look at too?
We could. There's really not much of a benefit, and the other thing I would caution against is we may find ourselves in a situation in the future where we want to put an overlay on other properties to satisfy our housing requirements. So my recommendation would not to be to do that at this time. If a specific affordable housing project comes in, we can always work with them to relax development standards if it's something the council would desire.
Okay. I just didn't remember that about the discussion about the Quality Inn before.
We picked them, but they could always come to us. We could consider it and make that change. As the
Correct.
project comes.
And there's other programs, and say there's a density bonus program, so there's other creative ways you can work for affordable housing program projects.
Good. Because that's a big piece of property there.
It is.
And that vacant land next to it, too. Is, the
Yeah.
property goes back quite a ways.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a presentation for us?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, City Council. So as you recall, at the last meeting, we resumed our discussions on the zoning code update. We made a lot of good progress. We got through all the issues that we presented to you that came out of our most recent public hearings with the Planning Commission. We do have a few final remaining issues to discuss with you tonight. The environmentally sensitive habitat area map revisions, which I'll lead off with, and then I'll turn it over to Katie. She's going to talk about the third-story residential use issue that Councilman Bertrand brought up at the last meeting. And then we'll also touch on the issue of the fee waivers for affordable second units. And then we'll hopefully conclude tonight and start public review. So as you recall, at the last meeting, we talked a little bit about the proposed changes to the environmentally sensitive habitat area map. What you see before you is a digital version of a hand-drawn map that we have had since the early 1980s. It's barely legible, so this was our best attempt to produce a digital copy of it. One of the things we noticed right away once we had this prepared was there's many areas that are fully developed. There's houses, there's concrete, there's roads, and little to no vegetation, and usually no native vegetation in some of these areas that were mapped. So we talked to the Planning Commission. They recommended that we update it so that our maps actually reflect on-the-ground conditions. The council concurred with that, and so I'll walk you through the changes. So that you understand, the environmentally sensitive habitat area is a definition in the State Coastal Act. That's why it's in our municipal code. For an area to qualify as an ESHA, it must be in an area which plant or animal life or their habitats are either rare or especially valuable because of their special nature or role in an ecosystem, and that area must be an area which could easily be disturbed or degraded by human activities and development. So as I mentioned, there were a couple areas that jumped out as us as being obvious mapping errors. I've highlighted 5 of those here. Nob Hill Shopping Center portion of the parking lot is currently mapped as environmentally sensitive. The city parking lots behind us and beneath us also have that designation, as well as portions of the Central Village, residentially zoned and developed areas in Depot Hill, and the New Brighton State Beach. So just taking a comparison look of those areas on an aerial, you can see these areas are not, vegetated, native, natural areas. And so we felt that it would be best to remove these from our overlay. This shows the proposed map that was prepared by a qualified local biologist. She went out, she did a qualitative survey, evaluated vegetation on the ground, and made a determination of the areas that, in her professional experience, she believed qualified for environmentally sensitive designations. There was one area of environmentally sensitive areas that have been added. This is up by New Brighton. And just another close-up to show you that there are some oak trees and some native understory in that area, and I feel that her determination is proper in this particular location. And then finally, a comparison of the maps. The dark green areas would be the new areas, which are within the environmentally sensitive areas. Those lighter green areas would be removed. That concludes my presentation on this, and I can answer any questions.
Yeah, I just have one question about the area by McGregor. Was that already pre-designated, or was that area added in? I don't know if on the first map if it was included, or was it red? Yeah, so the dark... Oh, the dark green shows the addition.
The dark green is the addition, the light green is taken out. And the reasoning is the light green area is mostly a developed campground. And furthermore, the city really has no regulatory control over the state park. So for us to put some special protection on their property is really meaningless.
I guess I'm more concerned about the remainder of the McGregor property that we own that could potentially
Right.
be used for some other purpose, and would this designation now preclude that from ever happening?
It doesn't necessarily. The implication of a property being designated with environmentally sensitive habitat area is you'd have to prepare a biology study for any type of development. And that would be true for that McGregor area, whether it's
Regardless.
designated or not, because there's habitat. The CEQA process would kind of cover that. The other thing it does is it does require development to be further set back in most cases unless it's unavoidable.
Okay, that was my only question.
Jacques, do you have a question?
No, I'm not an expert, but one concern I have about the area near our skate park and the New Brighton area is that the eucalyptus trees are starting to take over that area, mostly, right? And if that continues, along with the ivy, it's going to kill the native oak trees. So, it's a thing that's happening all over the state of California. So native environments, native animals, and all sorts of things that actually were here before the eucalypts are being eclipsed. Basically, they're taller. They create an environment on the floor of the forest that prohibits animal life as it was, and the fact that they're taller, they cast a shadow, so like the oak trees, which don't reach that high, basically die. And so
You want to put some money in the budget for tree removal?
I'm just making that statement at this time.
It's a public hearing. Would anyone in the audience like to address us on our zoning code update on this topic so far? Good evening.
Hi, Bob Edgren again. I was just curious on Brookdale Terrace. How did the biologist treat that, or did she?
So Brookvale Terrace, there were portions of it, as you can see on the map, that have been taken out. Those are areas where you have mobile homes currently, and so we felt it to be inappropriate and not consistent with the definition to keep those designated as environmentally sensitive. The wetland that runs through the creek still stays with, or keeps the designation.
Other comments?
Am I reading this correctly, that the Monarch Cove is no longer considered environmentally, that it was and it's not anymore?
So you can still see, it's kind of small, I apologize, but there is still a bit of a dark green area up there. That's the Monarch Butterfly Preserve. And what we did for those areas, I provided the biologists with previous biology studies and entomology studies by butterfly experts. She took those areas, the polygons they developed, and put them in this map.
Great. Is the Rispin in it?
It is. There's also a green spot over here.
Dark green spot there.
It's a little bit harder to see here. There's an outline on there, and she also did produce another map. I don't have it in the slideshow, but it does designate these areas differently.
I'm reluctant, on principle, to remove any area from being environmentally sensitive because I think that most of our city is environmentally sensitive. What would be the implication of us not only taking on the dark green but leaving the light green in place as well and just accepting it as environmentally sensitive? Because I don't think that just because a house is in a place or a road that it's no longer environmentally sensitive just because we've trodden there. So what are the ramifications of that?
So I guess I'd respond in two ways. First is, be considered environmentally sensitive, particularly from a CEQA perspective and certainly from the Coastal Act perspective. You have to have some constituent of native vegetation. And a single native tree, for instance, a redwood or an oak, is not habitat. You have to have a contiguous area large enough to benefit wildlife, essentially, or have sensitive, endangered, threatened plant species. So the implication of an area being mapped that doesn't support those characteristics is you're doing a biology study for every project, if that code is strictly adhered to. So if somebody came in next week in Depot Hill or in the Village in one of these areas and they want to do a little addition, a remodel, we'd have to say you need to do a biology study first and you need to set back further from your neighbor's house, potentially.
Thank you.
Jack.
Bob's comment had me thinking about something. So I live up from Brookbed Terrace, and I do know that they've modified that stream, Noble Gulch, but every year the chorus of frogs come back. So whatever is there is definitely great habitat for probably thousands of frogs. It's truly amazing. And, I don't often see in nature, and I walk around in nature, there's actually one up on Summit that I've seen that's a true place of very happy frogs, and that's out in the middle of the forest. And so I'm just wondering what the criteria is, because something is very fine for, I'm not a biologist, but I do know that amphibians are having a heck of a time these days with all the poisons that people put in the air and dump in the streams and stuff like that. But in that area that's not apparently a habitat sensitive is apparently very great for probably thousands of frogs. I mean, it's truly amazing. You go to sleep at night and you open up the window and you're lulled to sleep by something truly amazing.
It's actually a good point, and something that we hear relatively frequently when we do projects that have biological impacts or don't have them, and folks are concerned about it. They'll often raise the issue, well, there's raccoons there, there's skunks there, there's some other form of common urban wildlife, and certainly, it could affect some type of urban wildlife, but they're not particularly sensitive. They're not endangered. They're not rare. Their numbers aren't diminishing, so their population is threatened. So you're really looking at a habitat value that also provides protection to a special species.
Yeah, I don't know if these frogs are special, but I do know that amphibians need very special habitats to thrive, and I've lived next to multiple rivers and streams in my life and swampy areas in my life, and I've never heard such a cacophony of frog sounds in my life. It's truly amazing. It really is amazing.
And the amphibians really depend on having a wetland, a water source nearby. All the areas that are wetlands are going to remain mapped as environmentally sensitive.
Well, maybe we should just review the language in our general plan update and make sure we have really strong statements in there that reflect all of our opinions, that we feel that the whole town is environmentally sensitive and we want to protect the environment as much as we can everywhere. There's probably language in there about that. We could review
quite a bit.
Yeah, we could review that and strengthen that language or add to that so that it's clear. Ed.
Do we need a motion here or a consensus? What are you looking for?
I think a consensus is fine for this, and once we get that, we'll move to the next issue.
I'm of the mind to just accept the upgraded ESHA map as it is with the new areas.
I will second that.
Just by consensus, we'll agree to that? Sure. Okay, very good.
I should point out that the Coastal Commission is going to have to sign off this at the end of the day, so there's a chance we're going to be talking about it again.
Yeah.
I think we all want to do the right thing with regard to the environment, but it's got to be functional.
Okay, good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. Before you I'll go into the zoning code update, the two remaining issues. The first was brought up during public comment and regarding fee waivers for affordable ADUs. So when this went to Planning Commission, there's a section of code that has existed within our code for accessory dwelling units that the fees that are required for accessory dwelling units can be waived if the ADU is rented at a low or a very low income level. And when this went to Planning Commission, and there's also a provision in there that if the owner in the future decides to pay the fees at the current rate, the current cost, then they can have the affordability conditions removed from the ADU. This provision's been in our code since the ADU ordinance has existed and has not been utilized. The Planning Commission was of the opinion that tracking these units and making sure that people are charging low and very low rates would be a lot of work for staff, and since it hadn't been utilized and it would take staff hours, that they recommend that this be removed because they thought it would be just trouble tracking. So with that, this provision is not required by the state, and it was something that was put into our code. The other portion of this where it originated from is the City of Santa Cruz has a similar ordinance. They have this in their ADUs, and if we were to keep it, we'd need to better define exactly what fees could be waived and have it really outlined and specific, because as it's stated today, it just says waive the development fees, but it's not very clear exactly what development fees would be applicable to the standard. So with that, I'll ask for discussion or questions.
Jacques?
I have no problem with the, I'd like to see what Santa Cruz does, actually. I have no problem with waiving fees for providing affordable units. I have no problem with that. But the second sentence, relieved of affordability conditions upon payment of fees. So that implies to me going on in time as this unit has been paid for, it's an affordable unit, it's been designated as an affordable unit, and that's what they plan for. And then maybe in 5 years they forget it. And that we don't have any way to track that this is an affordable unit. We made it possible so that they could be affordable by some conditions, that maybe financing or something, I don't care what it is at this point, but it's been designated as an affordable. I want to make sure that it stays affordable. And that's my concern that I put forward to the board. And I'd like the board to consider that there are elements in this society that may not be able to afford as we can. And so this would go on in time. And that's what I'm trying to get at.
Other comments about it?
I'll wait till the public weighs in, then we'll have discussion. I don't have any questions at this point.
Shall we open it up to the public now? Is there anyone that would like to talk about this part of the zoning code? This is ADUs, accessory dwelling units, also called granny units, also called other things. Converted garages. Go for it, Ed. Okay, Ed.
Seeing none. Okay. I agree with Jacques on this. Conceptually, I don't have a problem with having some program that would somehow waive the fees, and if, in fact, it was going to be rented as an ADU. The problem is, I'm always hesitant, based on the language that planning normally gives us, is you don't want to create a system that creates a nightmare to regulate or to monitor. So I'm sensitive both ways. What I'd really like to see us do, if you don't mind, is kick it back to you and come back to us with what you think would be a reasonable idea of what fees should be paid, and with the intent that maybe this body would be willing to have some kind of a incentive for someone, to do that.
So I think I could respond to that now. There's basically two fees that you're going to pay to the city if you develop a second unit. There's planning permit fees and building permit fees. And there's a couple of minor add-ons. So I think really the question is, do you want to waive everything? Or just planning permit fees. And the other thing I would bring up, you bring up a really good point about the monitoring of it. I'm not sure how we could tell when a new renter comes in or out, aside from showing up periodically. City of Santa Cruz does have a rental inspection program. I don't know if they go to every rental every year and inspect it, but they at least have the staffing and a program in place to do those types of checks. We do lack that. I think it's a good idea to waive fees to promote affordable housing. I just don't think there should be a high expectation that's going to remain that way. It'll be a program that will be very easily gamed.
Has there ever been an applicant come in and asked to have their fees waived and made it
Since I've been
affordable?
here.
That makes me think that unless we're ready to give greater concessions to an applicant, that this is really a hollow part of our zoning code, really. And it's just making ourselves feel good.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say. We don't have that many people that even come in anyway. It would be nice to give them a break. I'd be happy to do that also.
No one is asking for it.
I know, but, maybe they don't know that they could ask for it, But there again, we'd have to have it monitored we'd have to increase the budget for our housing person to monitor it. And it would be difficult, but it's a nice goal if we can come back with some ideas about how to do it that's not going to cost us an arm and a leg to monitor it, and maybe we'll get one or two, and
at this point, ADUs are something that is evolving. I think we don't know how that's going to play out. I mean, and if we're taking a position of some kind of an affordable housing that we want to support, I would be willing to, based on what you just told me, and I don't know what those numbers are, I'd be willing to be in a position where we would not waive the building fees, but we'd waive planning fees and all other fees. And that would be an incentive that I would offer to someone, and then I wouldn't care about regulating it. Because the predominant amount of those fees would be the building fees. Am I accurate on that?
I will chime in that right now the way it's set up is if you comply with all of the development standards for an ADU, you do not go in front of a board and have it reviewed. So unless you're doing a second story or you're not developing it as the code is laid out, then it requires a CUP and a design permit, and that's when you go before Planning Commission. So really, in the way that it's set up today, it's an administrative over-the-counter permit and just a building permit. So essentially, there isn't, typically, if you're going to comply with the code, you're not going before Planning Commission for an ADU.
So essentially what I said is what we already do.
There is the administrative $500 fee that applies. So let me correct myself there.
So could I ask maybe a clarification question? Because it seems to me the issue is enforcement. But wouldn't it be obvious that it's a low-income unit just by square footage? If
Not necessarily. I have
or
one.
location and square footage.
You can come over and see mine. I've rented it as an affordable unit all these years, but not necessarily. People will pay a lot of money for 500 or 600 square feet in Capitola, especially if you have off-street parking, especially if you have a yard, especially if you have a private entrance. Prices are higher than I could have.
I would propose that.
Sorry.
Until
great idea, though.
Until we're prepared as a council to offer greater incentives to build low-income ADUs, that we leave things the way they are. And if at some point in time we talk about housing and we say, well, we're ready to subsidize the construction of an ADU if it remains affordable, that's the real meat of it. This means nothing.
Second.
So, I think Ed brought a good point. And, if you were here at the last meeting 2 weeks ago, it's sort of obvious. We're sort of jumping into ADUs, and some of the designations like JDU is probably going to be mostly affordable. So, this is going to be an evolving thing. And I totally agree with Mike that, and I think I said something about this last time, if we step in and help finance, then by principle, I'd say this is public money to get a public good. And the public good here is affordable housing. And I'm going to add that I'm really very much for ADUs, because I think in terms of providing housing, this is an organic way to include housing in the community. And you could bet if your ADU that you're going to rent out to someone that is going to pay market rate or someone that's going to be paying an affordable housing rate, you want that person to be someone that you feel very comfortable with. So this is, to me, a good way to expand housing in the community in a way that, in a neighborly sense, we could actually learn to live with, because the neighbor next door to me is not going to rent to someone that they don't like, and you know that neighbor, and so it's going to work out. But I think this is an evolving thing. Santa Cruz is embarking on it. And like I said 2 weeks ago, I wasn't for it at first, but now I'm starting to think that this is a very positive thing for our community, and I prefer for us to take control of it rather than let it, sort of carry away in some direction we don't take control of it.
Yeah, I like your idea of waiving the planning fees.
Except for the building.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think I understand what you're saying, Mike. I think it's good to have something on the books. Everybody's talking about housing now, and it would be nice for us to say, yeah, we have a plan. Probably never happen, but it might, and that would be nice to say. We'll waive some fees to encourage affordable units, and then how we regulate it, we'll have to increase the budget for the housing lady.
Well, what Katie said is true. I mean, there might be cases where there really has to be a good look from our planning department if it's second story and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think what I followed up with was when Mike made his point, and that's why when he said it, I seconded it, is that this is not something that's coming to us. And when it does come to us as something we have to deal with, then we can open ourselves up to how we want to deal. But right now, if you look at this is pretty forgiving, so I don't see a reason to change it at this point. Is that what you proposed, leave it as it is? And I did second that.
But then revisit it at some time in the future in the context of housing, not our zoning ordinance.
But we're doing the zoning ordinance now, so this is the appropriate time to add the language in here if we're going to do it, and just as a placeholder for the future.
We have the language in there now, and we waive the development fees for ADUs. That's what we have right now, and it's all good.
We need to state what those development fees are. We need to say building or planning, or we need to quantify it somehow and have a little bit more of a plan.
One suggestion would be to keep the language as it is today, and we could draft a policy that would be applicable to these scenarios in
Right.
which we would identify which fees, and we could come back with exactly what those numbers are.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, so the Planning Commission recommended taking this bit of code out because
Right.
the permit fees that we charge are, relatively, as Katie indicated, relatively insignificant compared to the other fees that the Water District will charge. And at the end of the day, trying to monitor what someone's doing in their backyard in terms of a rental just seems like a Herculean task that I'm not sure how the city would ever get there. I know the city of Santa Cruz took this out because of the difficulty, is that correct, in monitoring?
They still have this.
Oh, they still have this.
They have it.
So, and so, in the scheme of things, I think when this came up, the Planning Commission said, we're not sure how we would be able to actually effectively do it. And so that's my primary concern.
Well, we could always find a way at the time, but once again, we're discussing and debating a solution to a problem we don't have yet.
No, but while we're updating the zoning ordinance, this is the time to make these kind of changes. And,
Right, but I'm saying we can leave it in there and be just fine. Since no one's ever asked for it, I don't think we need to worry about how to enforce it if it's never had to be enforced.
But we'll have to figure that out when it happens. It'd be better to figure it out now while we're dealing with it.
Okay, I
How
think
about we need an ordinance about the monitoring of keeping dragons in your backyard too. I mean, that's we're talking about angels dancing on the head of a pin here.
Okay, so I'd like to, again, bring up what Ed said and bounce off what Mike said. So, as Ed pointed out, this is an evolving thing. Okay, and you're right. Let's try to deal with it now, but we don't quite know what it's going to be. And Mike's main point, I think, is if at that point we figure out a way, like, for instance, if David Foster was here, we'd start working on a way to figure out how to come up with affordable housing financing, maybe doing programs with Habitat or South County Housing or something like that. We'd come up with ways that we could work with. And there's probably agencies out there that would help us along and help us keep up the modifications and, the tracking and all that sort of stuff. So at that point, let's do that. But at this point, let's just say we're going to keep it as it is, and when we get to that point, we'll try to figure out a way to actually finesse it. And that's all I'm saying. I see what you're saying. You're saying, let's try to deal with it now, but we don't know exactly
Well,
what
just
it's
in
all gonna be.
concept, and the concept would be in order to encourage affordable housing and the building of ADUs, we will waive X fees. That's all. Period. So the Planning Commission is recommending that we take both of these sentences out.
They wanted to take them out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Mike wants to leave them in.
I don't, I'd rather take them out also because landlords shall be relieved of affordability conditions upon payment of fees.
So they could have a deed restricted unit that they're required
Change their mind. Oh, yeah.
And then 10 years later, they would do a prorated rate for the fees. They'd pay the fee, and then they'd be alleviated of the affordability requirement. And this comes into play also, another thing to think about is when people buy and sell homes, and if they have a deed restricted unit in the back, then the new owner could also pay off those fees. So I think that's why that provision is there. It might be perfect for one owner, but not for the next. So.
And is that something we want to do? Have some affordable housing today, but not tomorrow? Or do we want it to be?
Well, this opens the door for
Yeah.
that. I mean, this will allow somebody, and the only thing, if you want to change it, if you want to do it, you can just change may to will, okay? I mean, that's all. I mean, we're doing the same thing, giving them the option. But I think what Mike said, and what I seconded, and I still stand by that, is I'm willing to leave this language in because it allows our intent. And I don't really care about whether we regulate it. I mean, because we're not going to go in the backyards and regulate this.
Until the occasion arises.
And when it does, we can bring it back and we can deal with it. But for now, we'll be able to sign off on this part of the zoning.
Any other comments?
I have a little bit of a concern or a question about the idea of relieving affordability conditions upon payment of fees. I'm interested in the potential for adding something along the lines of and change of tenant, because my concern is that someone's going to decide, I don't want this to be an affordable unit anymore, pay off the fees, but now whoever that tenant is that's in that unit at that time, what happens to them if they can't afford it anymore?
Right.
So is there any opportunity, any interest in adding something saying that you'll be relieved of those affordability conditions if you pay the fees
Can we do that?
Or if your tenant leaves, or something along those lines. That's my concern, is that someone's going to be living there, the person with the, ADU in their yard is going to say, no, I want more money out of this, and if you can't pay for it, too bad, it's time for you to go.
So if I understand the concern correctly, there's no restriction in the current ordinance or proposed on the amount of rent. It's simply the income level. So somebody could raise the rent and the city wouldn't intervene. It would just be a matter of somebody being low or very low income that could rent that unit.
I think we need some more information on this topic.
Such as?
I think this is a housing.
I mean, what are other cities doing to promote affordable housing, to promote ADUs, and yet it doesn't become a big bureaucratic nightmare?
This is a housing
maybe there
issue.
Maybe there isn't.
No, I think there's a couple typical models. One is fee waivers, which is the topic we're talking right now, and the other is relaxed development standards.
But I'd also be interested in some long-term affordable housing. I mean, this is a problem that's just beginning now. I mean, it began before, but we're going to be dealing with this for the rest of our lives. And what is this community going to do for this? We have a chance now to try to encourage at least some ADUs. But then we have the problem of if it's going to be forever, then that is going to be a monitoring problem. John?
So one thing I've seen in San Francisco, I'm not an expert on housing, but what they did was the federal government came in and allowed for low-income housing for a period of 20 years or 30 years or something like that, and they helped finance it. And then at the end of that period, it turned to market rate housing. So basically for that period of 20 or 30 years, you did have low-rate housing, and it was an inducement to the developer to develop that housing. So it worked both ways. So you got some low-income housing for a period of time, and the developer was willing to go in knowing that in long term they could actually get market rates. I didn't quite like that for the same reason that Kristen just brought up, because after 20 or 30 years, now the people who've been living there are now faced with the raise in rents. But in San Francisco, there was rent control, so that was partially controlled. But it was an inducement, and that was a good thing about it. It was an inducement to developers to actually do something to provide low-income housing. So maybe there's ways we could start thinking about how to deal with this policy. And I don't know, how to deal with it right now, because like Mike said, we don't have it before us. I would like for staff to put some time into, and I think Ed talked about this, into thinking about how we should position ourselves so that we do provide for low-income housing, and we provide it for the public in such a way that it just isn't cut off in 5 years, or because the house is sold, it's forgotten, something like that. And I think part of the way that this might work is if we partner with other organizations. And so they carry the burden. And maybe there should be a fee to make that happen, because they're still getting the rent. But, I don't know how to make that work. But, Kitty.
If I may, I think there are some things that should be celebrated over what occurred at the last meeting. The minimum lot size previously was 5,000 square feet. You dropped that to 4,000 square feet. That was a Planning Commission recommendation, and the City Council agreed. That brings in, I want to estimate, I think it was between 250 to 300 new parcels within the city in which you're allowed to have ADUs. You also you incorporated the JADU system, so it's not, you no longer have to have a full kitchen in your home. You can have an efficiency kitchen. So a lot of things have been adopted within the zoning code that have really opened the door for more citizens to come forward once this is official and get a second unit. I think you'll see a lot more secondary units in the Jewel Box and most likely the Depot Hill area based on the changes that have occurred. So just remember, there has been substantial work in this new ordinance that you've created a great avenue for more people to have accessory dwelling units on their lots. And also the waiver of parking. There's been quite a few changes that have occurred in the zoning code update that should be celebrated, and you can feel accomplished for creating. So.
Yeah, and thank you for pointing that out. And I think there was a comment at the last meeting that due to the size of the unit, the market rate, is going to be ratcheted down. You're not going to be wanting to pay for 300 square feet the same that you would pay for, a major apartment with everything. So limiting yourself on space might provide a place to at least live. So.
Ed,
correct me if I'm wrong, this has nothing to do with rent. We're talking about fees. Is that right? So we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves,
Yeah.
okay? We're talking about a policy that we can allow some lenience towards fees.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah,
So
you're right.
I'm going back to trying to not make it complicated, make it simple, and that is I'm willing to leave the language in. Planning wanted to take it out, I'm willing to leave it in. I think it's going in the direction we want to go, and I don't want to complicate it until we need to, so.
I agree with you.
I'm going to go
For
back to
now,
Mike's
for now, yeah.
suggestion that I second.
And let's just keep our eyes open, and if we see some other communities that are doing some good, have some good planning around ADUs, we can copy their plan.
Good. There's a motion on the floor.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thanks for that discussion.
I had a couple of questions about other material.
She's got one more.
Okay.
Would you like me to, do you want to ask questions, or would you
go
like to
ahead. I'll
jump
just
into
do
the
it
next?
again.
Okay.
Thanks.
So during the last meeting, Councilmember Bertrand asked that we bring back a discussion on third stories within the Central Village and limiting third stories within the new height exception, limiting that new story to residential only, and this is within the village. So with that, I'm going to introduce the permitted uses within the village today. So on the first story, traditionally within the zoning code, you've regulated what can happen on the first story, and then there's been more lenience within the second, and if there's a possibility of a third story within the third story. So permitted uses, this does not include your conditional uses, in the village include retail and personal service establishments. There's also an allowance for mixed use in which your retail or personal service would be on the first story and then residential units above. Within your second story and your future third story, retail and personal service establishments continue to be a permitted use. There's also an allowance for offices, duplexes, and multifamily. So there's an allowance for residential uses, and then offices are added, and then the retail and personal service. There are plenty of conditional use permits on all floors, and that's for your restaurants, your entertainment uses, all of those that probably have more intensification that require a conditional use permit to make sure that you've mitigated those impacts. Another provision in the new code is that if a proposed residential use is to replace an existing upper floor commercial use, the residential use is allowed by right. So in the circumstance where you have, we could say the Mr. Kebab's building, there's an office space above it, and if that office space were to become a residential suite, that would be allowed by right in that location.
Wasn't it previously an apartment?
It's currently an office space. Another example is the superintendent building. There were offices on the second story. We just had a building permit come in, and the office space has now transitioned to a residential use, which is a permitted use on the second story in the commercial.
I think above Mr. Kebab's, it was a rental at one time.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, right now, it's currently an office space. So the question is, should that third story be limited to residential only? A couple of things that will help with your decision is looking at the village residential overlay. So right now, they're in our current code, they're in the areas hatched in blue in the residential overlay. Those areas are limited to residential uses only. So if you were to come in and buy one of those, a unit at the Venetian, you would not be able to open a surf shop there, and it would be limited to residential only. And that's areas of Lawn Way are also subject to that, as well as the Six Sisters and then the Cherry Avenue area and Riverview. So taking a closer look, the areas that are not in the residential overlay are along Capitola Avenue, Monterey Ave, San Jose, and the Esplanade. This area, another factor is that it's within the vacation rental overlay, so the whole area can be rented for nightly rental if you have residential in any of these areas. So a couple of examples of three-story buildings. As I mentioned, the superintendent's building, that recently the second floor converted to residential. There's residential along the Esplanade, shown in the top right corner on that curve onto Monterey. The Mercantile is a property that we will probably see in the future redevelop and in which this provision would apply to. Also, along the Esplanade, there's above Margaritaville, there's 3 stories, and then the future hotel parking lot along Monterey. So with that, I'll leave it to you to discuss. I think it's important to identify what the goal is, and then we can help you draft the zoning language to reach that goal. But with that, we'll open the discussion for residential and hotel use on the 3rd story.
Who would like to start?
Questions or
Questions.
I have no questions.
Questions, John?
Yeah, so I have questions. So what would be the effect and how, if we were to have residents on the 3rd floor or 2nd and 3rd floor, we were going to expand that use, how would that work out? I'm thinking about parking, I'm thinking about coastal permits, and that relationship between parking and coastal commission. That's the first thing that comes to mind for me.
So for an expansion, there's very limited areas in the village that could expand and actually have a 3rd story because you need to meet your on-site parking requirement once you've expanded more than 10% of the building. So in those terms, there isn't much area for expansion. There's the parking lot that I identified earlier, the Mercantile, possibly just down the street on Capitola Avenue where its Wine Time was. That location has parking. But it's really limited in terms of how large an expansion could be to a 3rd story.
Also, if our intent was to provide for residential housing with the assumption that we want people in the village, what protection do we have if the owner of that building wants to do a short-term rental?
As it is zoned today, it's transient rental overlay. So if you were to have residential on the 3rd story, that could be rented as nightly rental. The flip side of that is if you did not allow nightly rental there, it's an open market. So you may have a local resident move into your 3rd story, or it may become a second home for somebody that does not live here all the time. So.
What kind of options do we have from a planning perspective, zoning planning perspective? Is that something we could talk about right now to actually make that occur as a policy that we would like to see residents in these particular buildings?
I believe the challenge with that is that it is an open market. So if you want them to be lights on, people living in these places, we continue to hear the trend of in Depot Hill that there are less and less lights on and that the neighbors aren't home because they're second homes. So I think if it's a matter of keeping the lights on, having a presence of people in the village, the better zoning mechanism would be to keep it within your transient rental overlay, because people would be there and utilizing the nightly rental of Airbnb within these 3rd stories. But if you were to not allow the nightly rental, you might luck out and get a local who lives there full time, or it might be sold as a second home and have the lights out. So.
Okay. So if we establish this policy and we said it's permitted as a residence, can we provide the parking by making the provision that they have to have parking permits, let's say the upper parking lot or the one behind City Hall, that kind of thing?
I don't think so, not without opening up other sections of the code that we've made decisions on. As you recall, we had a discussion about in lieu parking, I think, a couple of times within the last year. The council direction was to only allow the in lieu parking program for a large village hotel and the old theater property and parklets. And the council further directed that we weren't going to codify that in the zoning code. It was going to live in the administrative policy. So I think if we're going to go that route, we have to incorporate it into the ordinance and then expand the allowed use types that could take advantage of it.
Right. So when we decide how much parking we need in the village and in this area of Central Village, I guess, have we taken into account, besides the businesses and the needs for, getting to the beach, people sitting at tables and stuff like that, do we have a pretty good idea of the people that live in here and what the parking demand is?
So the parking requirement we currently have today is in the city's 1981 local coastal program. I really can't speak to the methods that were used to develop that study. The city did update one in 2008, and that did account for all businesses, homes. They did a parking demand for all development down there, and then a calculation of the parking supply needed. We do have that number. That was used as a basis for our in lieu fee program, which gave us somewhere in the neighborhood, I want to say like 48 surplus spaces.
Okay, so roughly we're taking into account what the residential requirements, whether it's TRO or people who live there full time.
Correct.
Okay.
Would anyone in the public like to address us on this issue? Thank you for waiting so long. Public. Good evening.
I have a question regarding JDU and this concept. How could JDUs be applied to this? In other words, the superintendent house, could they create a whole new unit up there without any kind of parking?
No, I don't think so. I think we would, if somebody wanted to put residential up there, we'd consider it multifamily housing.
It would require parking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The more units you have, the more parking that's required.
Good evening. Thanks for waiting.
Thank you so much. My name is Kari Sid, and I own the Capitola Hotel. And I just want to advocate for trying to give as much flexibility as possible, certainly in the village with respect to businesses. And I certainly understand the need to partner between our business district and our residents. And I think that that partnership is super important. And I do believe that all of our businesses in the village have our residents' best interest. And we are eyes on the street when there are things going on in the middle of the night. And we are calling the police on behalf of our entire village to make it a safe place. So I just wanted to come tonight to say that our merchants and our businesses, we need a little help. We need to grow, and we need to continue to be the vibrant part of the village. The residents weren't here first. I think it was the fishing village first. And business was always established as a core part of why people wanted to come here. And the tourism that's been established in Capitola is what makes the property values worth what they are. So if you took all these businesses out, which we are seeing ones close, time and time again because of some of the issues that we're experiencing with both parking and our low season, we don't want to put limitations that could potentially bring businesses away from being able to grow and opportunities I have. Parking will always be an issue. We must find a different solution to parking. Finding more parking spots and making more parking spots is not the solution. Think about what they did when they first started. There was a trolley. There was parking somewhere else, or there was some other place where people got onto something and came into this village. Imagine a village where the Esplanade had no cars on it, and there was something else bringing tourism in. I mean, we have to think differently. We have to think out of the box. But limiting what opportunities our businesses have, that's a risk. It's a risk to not only the businesses, but also the residents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address us? Then I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the council. What would you like to do?
Sure, I'll start off. I had some discussions with planning on this, and I tried to put it in perspective so I could understand it. And I'm trying to incorporate some of the comments you made, Kari. I'm not sure if I'm going to be on the same page because I was trying to follow where you're going with regard to, we're trying to decide what goes on the third floor, whether that becomes residential/hotel or commercial. That's how we ended up here. That's what we're deciding on. And my vision, which helped me make this decision, is there's very few opportunities left in the village where the third story option is going to come in. I think Katie pointed out 3, and the one that's the most viable to me when I think about impacting the village, significantly impacting the villages. Someday, I believe, not in my lifetime, but someone will bring a great plan for the mercantile to maybe be completely redone, and there may in fact be a hotel. And the vision that I've always heard people talk about and what we were trying to accomplish and what I support is what's going to make the village vibrant is if people come into the village, they stay overnight, they shop in the businesses, they eat in the restaurants, and they go home. So if the Mercantile was going to be torn down and Plantronics was going to come in and build a 3-story, designer location with ocean views to encourage their employees to be more productive, that would be great for them, but commercial on the 3rd floor would not give that vision of what I think the village needs to prosper. So my vision is that, I would like to see residential/hotel on the 3rd floor. If it ends up, because of the fact that we created the overlay zone, that it becomes vacation rental, that's what we created. That's our vision of the village. And likewise with the hotel, I just would love to see, something like that either happen. But my vision for the village is that it's a place where overnight visitors come, they stay 2 or 3 nights, they support the business, they support the residents, and they keep the lights on, as you said, in the village, makes it look like it's a vibrant place. And so I would support residential hotel only on the 3rd floor. And that would be my motion.
I don't support the retail on the 3rd floor, but that's because it wasn't successful in the past. We had some businesses that were upstairs. Nobody would ever go up to them, but they didn't stay in business very long. They didn't do very well unless we had a lawyer office. There was a lawyer's office upstairs, a couple of things like that. But they just didn't work. But what do you think?
I would be in favor of making the 3rd story of all structures residential/hotel.
I agree, especially because if you have multifamily on the 2nd floor, then someone's going to have to walk through that to get to anything else up on the 3rd floor. And that seems very awkward and just inconvenient for both the people that would be living there and the people trying to get to the 3rd floor. So I agree that residential hotel on the 3rd makes the most sense.
John?
So in our planning code, we have under CV Central Village District, and I'm not going to read the things on TRO. We know what that means. Ed just talked about it. So we want, the purpose of the CV zoning district, Central Village, is to promote the family-oriented residential/commercial mix, as the recent public comment, which has created unique qualities of the village. Commercial activity should serve both the Capitola residents and the visitors. The balance of coastal visitors, related uses, services that serve the permanent residents is critical to maintaining the village as it presently exists. So I guess when this was written, 1987, there were residents in the village, and it was of considerable importance that it had to be mentioned in the code. And when I first came here 19 or so years ago, and I was on the village committee, one of the things people talked about was the fact that we're losing residents downtown. And in the sense that the Capitola Village is a residential area, and we're losing that because of our overlay transient occupancy zone, we have to recognize that, in a sense, our village is changing. And it's becoming an area that is increasingly, and probably more so as we go forward in time, a place where we have visitors that are here for the weekend, maybe for a week. And that's good. That's good for business. I mean, the residents are going to be happy. We're going to get transient occupancy tax. That's good. But I think we're in a situation, partially because of parking, as public comment talked about. We can't easily expand our housing stock without pressures on parking. And when I was on the village committee, we were talking then considerably about a parking lot behind City Hall. So the reason why I brought this up was because I just want some realization that our village is changing. And there's issues there that I think we will, as a community, need to start thinking about. Parking, the balance between residents and businesses, and how we work together, as alluded by public comment. I was a merchant. Believe me, I know how important it is to have that partnership with the residents around you. That's very critical. They're sometimes your main customers, and they're the ones that are going to support you. So I asked for this because I want that discussion. I think we're in a city that's changing, so I'm repeating myself. But what do we want it to become? And right now, probably because of our TRO overlay, we're an area that's less friendly to residences that want to stay here. Sure, I'll rent out my room for $300 a night or a weekend or something like that. Hey, that's going to be a great deal. And then people are going to see that's what I want. I'm going to buy a house to do that. And there's nothing wrong with it. That's the economy. But it's changing us. So I brought this forward because I want us to think about that. And in concept, I have no problem doing resident hotel use on the third floor. I don't know how it's going to work out because of parking. So if someone buys a buys a building, they change the third floor to TRO, they're going to come to Tracy and ask for a parking permit. And what are we going to say to them? Okay? We don't really have that space. So we need to start thinking about if these things are going to be pressuring, they're going to come slowly, but they're going to come for sure. We need to really figure out how we're going to deal with parking. A shuttle works, but we're not going to be doing it 365, But the residents might be there 365. I don't know. So that's the reason why I brought it up. I'll support housing on third floor also.
Do we need to take action on this? Because it's already in the code.
That's clear. We will make a modification to the code before it goes out for public review.
The hotel is a new addition, is that? Yeah.
We'll change the land use table.
Any other comments on this? I just had a couple of just minor changes on the first chart that you have, first page of the chart, down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where it says Stockton Creek.
Yes.
Should be Soquel. And
thank you.
And on the page 8D1. I'll give these to you afterwards because they're very minor.
They're just corrections.
Yeah, they're just minor spelling and some things like that.
Okay.
And then maybe next time a little key on the map so we know what we're looking at. Because these were really hard maps to figure out because they didn't have any legend on it, so I didn't know what I was looking at first.
Okay.
But otherwise they were good. Okay. Any other discussion on this?
Well, with that, I'll give you an overview of the final steps. This evening, we are looking for direction to initiate public review of the zoning code. We'll be taking all the modifications that you've provided and all the modifications the Planning Commission provided that you agreed to, and amending the document, accepting all the changes, and then placing that document out for a 60-day public review was the direction we heard prior. After that, this will be late summer. We'll be returning to the Planning Commission and it'll depend on how much public comment we receive, which date we pick for the Planning Commission return, and how much preparation has to be done to provide, list out all those public comments and have explanations. And so we're suggesting that'll probably be late summer, 1 to 2 meetings at Planning Commission, depending on the amount of public comment. And then following the Planning Commission recommendation, we'll be coming to the City Council for final review and adoption. And then after that, it goes off to the Coastal Commission review.
Great.
So this evening, we are looking for a motion to initiate the public review.
Great job, Jacques.
Yeah, and I'd be interested in some coming back to the council on how communities work with people who put in ADUs to ensure affordability as time moves by. Mm-hmm. So that it stays in that vein. Okay.
I will move that we begin the public process.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. That's quite an accomplishment.
Yay.
Yeah.
That's the end of our agenda, unless there's anyone that has any oral communications or announcements or awards, good news. Then thank you very much. We are adjourned. Thank you. Good night.